Jim, is the home of our Monday Night Purple show, live on News Talk 830 WCCO. And next Monday, Harrison Smith will be our player guest, and looking forward to talking with Harrison about the Eagles game and looking ahead to the Detroit game. And so I co-host the show with Joe Anderson. A lot of fun in the restaurant, great atmosphere out there. Have had great turnouts every week, and looking forward to continuing that. And I encourage everyone to go to B-52 Burgers and Brew, Inver Grove Heights and Lakeville. They have a terrific menu, 25 varieties of burgers, great entrees and appetizers. Irv Smith Jr. had the ribs last week. They looked really good, and so I think it's a terrific restaurant. And they also have Monday night specials, a fun rooftop patio, and a fantastic Sunday brunch. So check out their website, b52burgersandbrew.com, and hope to see you there for Monday Night Purple.
The other point I was going to make about Diggs was, how receivers handle things is a big deal for their organizations and their careers, of course. But sometimes they are right. Diggs has been open a lot this season and has not gotten the ball. And on Sunday, basically, Cousins fed Thielen, which is understandable. Thielen's a great player, and he had a great game. And he fed Dalvin Cook, which is, again, very understandable. Diggs was very open on a lot of plays and did not get the ball.
Yeah, but he did make a big play towards the end of the game when they were trying to run out the clock, and had a big first down when the Vikings were only up two scores at that point in the ball game. And so that was a big play, helped them run out the clock and end the game. And yeah, I think he has been open. Thielen's been open deep, and Cousins has missed him, especially in Green Bay when he missed both those guys open deep in that game. And so I can understand some frustration on the part of both of those guys, Diggs and Thielen, but I think you just have to handle it professionally. I think Adam did a better job of doing that than Stefan in this situation. So we'll see how it shakes out going forward. I think one thing with the Vikings passing game, it's been good to see Dalvin Cook very involved with the screen game. I think that was a big thing that I was looking for offensively, that they worked on a lot in training camp, and we didn't see a lot of the first 4 games, and a heavy dose of screens against the Giants. I expect to see similar in the coming weeks as these defenses try to pressure Cousins, and I think it's a good formula because they've got the kind of mobile offensive linemen that can get out there and block on the screen game, and did a really good job in that regard. And Dalvin Cooks, we know when he's out in space, very tough to handle. And Alexander Madison, too, has done a nice job. So I think that's something to look for going forward, is continuation of the screen games beginning this week, of course. And I think the tight ends are kind of missing in action the entire season.
And especially Rudolph. Irv Smith at least had one good game. Rudolph has been invisible.
Yeah, I mean, Kyle, I think, has 5 or 6 catches, and Irv, I think, is the same. And neither of them have caught a touchdown pass this year. You're paying Rudolph whatever $7 to $9 million, and that doesn't bode well necessarily for his future. Paying him that kind of money to be a block. Now, he's a great blocker, and he's been really good in the run game, but not sure that you're going to be paying a tight end that kind of money to do that role. And so I expect to see more production from the tight ends as we go forward, and maybe this is the week that they can start doing that. On the other side of the coin, they're going to play a really good tight end in Zach Ertz, a Pro Bowl guy who has hurt the Vikings a lot in the past 2 games. And last year he had 10 catches for 110 yards and a touchdown, led the Eagles receivers. Going back to the NFC Championship game, he really killed them in that game, made a couple of big plays. And so it'll be incumbent on Harrison Smith and Anthony Harris and Anthony Barr, Eric Kendricks, to do a really good job on Ertz as he's running his routes. And because he's a guy that Wentz really looks for, he's their leading receiver. We know Alshon Jeffrey has been a problem for the Vikings in the past too. Fortunately for them, looks like they're not going to have to deal with Deshaun Jackson this week.
He is not. He's been hurt lately. Yes.
Yeah. He's been out with an abdominal, and they think it might be a sports hernia. And so the Eagle running game is nothing to be frightened of. Jordan Howard has had some pretty good games against the Vikings in the past, but I think they can handle him. So it shakes out as really an interesting game. I think the one thing, too, that helped the team a lot offensively last week, Jim, that people have not talked a lot about, Josh Klein returned to the starting lineup, and he was having a really good season for them. He was kind of their premier free agent signing. It wasn't a big bucks deal. It was a $5 million a year deal to play right guard for them, but playing really well for the Vikings, better than he was in Tennessee, kind of reverting back to his days in New England when he was a good offensive lineman. And they missed him in Chicago, and I think that had an effect. Really, Dakota Dozier is an okay player, but he's a backup guy, and I think they really missed Klein last week. And so we'll see what kind of impact having that whole group together this week again will do for the team. And because Bradbury's getting better, Elflein's getting better at guard, Klein's playing well. Riley Reif, I think they still need to help him on the outside in terms of pass blocking. Brian O'Neill, a really good player, but the interesting matchups for me this week in that Eagle game, one of them will be Brian O'Neill taking on Brandon Graham, who is the leading sacker for the Eagles. And inside the inside game, Fletcher Cox, one of the best inside defensive linemen in the NFL, and that'll be a big challenge for Klein specifically, and also for Elflein and Bradbury. So some of the matchups to watch for this week.
O'Neill's a good pick, by the way. It's very easy for us to talk about misses in the draft, but O'Neill was a nice pick. They nailed it. They said this guy's a good young guy, needs to just put a little extra weight on, and he has, and he's a very stout run blocker, but he's also doing well in pass blocking right now, so give him credit for that one. Let's go to around the league and then come back to our Vikings picks. Again, follow us on Twitter at TalkNorthPod, please, if you would. Also, you can find our shows anywhere, any podcast app you want. Go ahead and rate us, rip us, whatever you like. Let people know that we are here. Chase Daniel and the Bears just shut down the Vikings. Then they go to London and they get beat up by the Raiders. Now, I'm interested in your view. Do you think that was mainly because the Raiders had a week to prepare for Chase Daniel and backup quarterbacks tend to not do very well once they are on tape? Or is it the fact the Bears went over late and it looked like it took them 3 quarters to get going?
I think the Bears were sleepwalking through the first 3 quarters of that game, and Matt Nagy, the coach, wants to claim that it had no effect that they went over on Friday. I don't buy that.
I don't buy it.
No, I mean, it's still
looked just dead the first half.
It's still a long flight. It's an adjustment, and I think they made a mistake by going over that late in the week, and I think that maybe there was a letdown after they had the big win over the Vikings and thought the Raiders would lay down for them because the Vikings had hammered the Raiders, and so they're looking at all these things and this is a no problem game, and all of a sudden you're in a game, you're down 17-0 and fighting for your life, and so the Bears drop a big one in London. That was a big loss for them. So the Vikings are back tied with them, but on the other side of the coin, meanwhile the Packers are going to Dallas and pull the upset, which maybe is not such an upset because they've had so much success in Dallas. And Aaron Rodgers has won, 9 of his last 10 games in Dallas or something like that.
Amazing.
Yeah, amazing stretch, including a playoff game. And they just really hammered the Cowboys in that game. So Green Bay is playing well, and we'll see how that race continues to shake out. They've got a big game with Detroit this week in Lambeau. And so I expect the Packers to prevail in that game. But
do you think Detroit's legitimate? They're off to, it's not that unusual for the Lions. I know this is a different coach, different group of players for the most part, but it's not unusual for the Lions to get off to a fast start and then peter out. I will say they got a good number 1 receiver. Now they have a legitimate running back that you have to game plan for. And the defense does look improved over last year. Yeah,
they do. And I think they made some good scores in free agency on the defensive side, and I think they're improved. I'm not ready to say they're a contender yet. I want to see them over the next couple of weeks, specifically going against the Packers and the Vikings, see how they shake out in those 2 games and then going forward. But I think that Matthew Stafford is a guy that he goes as his offensive line goes, and the Vikings sacked him 10 times last year in the game here and hammered him pretty good. And so I'm not ready to give Detroit contender credit yet. Let's just see how that goes. But they're definitely improved. There's no doubt about that. And they played Kansas City very tough the week before and almost knocked off Patrick Mahomes and company. But again, the Chiefs were missing Tyreek Hill. They were missing some other top players on their team in that particular game, and Mahomes has been nursing a sprained ankle, even though he's still playing fantastic, and he's still on a pace to set an NFL season record for passing yards. I did write about him today in my sportingnews.com column about what I'm projecting his contract to be. I think I may have really rattled some people in Kansas City because all the thought process is he's going to get $40 million a year. I think he's going to get more than $40 million a year.
Wow.
because he'll still have 2 years left on his current contract, and when you factor that in to even a $44 million a year extension, which is what I projected, an NBA-like number, it still comes out to about $35 a year when you factor in the 2 remaining years on his contract after this year. But they're definitely going to have to deal with him contract-wise in the coming offseason. He's not going to play another down. I know Lee Steinberg well enough from lots of negotiations that he's going to make sure that he gets taken care of. And why would you not? He's the face of the franchise. He does all the right things on and off the field.
Absolutely. If you're going to spend money on a player, spend it on him.
That's right. Great player and, terrific guy. And so that's all good. But he's also coming off a game where they got beat by the Colts, which surprised a lot of people. But Indy is better than people think.
Indy's good, and once Mahomes hurt his ankle, you could see he just wasn't as effective, and he wasn't making them pay with outside the pocket plays.
Right, and he also was missing Hill and missing Sammy Watkins in that game, and so he's really down his 2 best receivers other than Travis Kelce, and the Chiefs' running game is not great. So if Mahomes is not right with the ankle and he's missing his top guys, then Kansas City is mortal. But when those guys all get back, then they're pretty prolific, and so that will be something to watch. And the other thing that keeps catching my attention around the NFL is Christian McCaffrey. And Dalvin Cook goes out and has a 200-plus yard combined game, and McCaffrey tops him, and is just on a pace to set an NFL record for combined rushing receiving, and he's carrying that Carolina team without Cam Newton.
It always cracks me up whenever people question, size in a running back, and they're talking about height. Because Emmitt Smith was about 5'10", Barry Sanders is about 5'10", Walter Payton wasn't all that tall. But these guys weren't small; they were relatively short, but they were powerhouses. And Emmitt Smith and Sanders both made great use of being able to hide behind offensive linemen. I mean, sometimes guys didn't see the back until the back was past them.
That's right, and McCaffrey, about 5'11", 200, but he is very fast, very quick, and almost like a Dalvin Cook in that regard. That Dalvin has that quickness and that speed, and they're both can be breakaway backs when they get out in the open field. And so, poor Dalvin, he's doing some great stuff, but he's still not the best back in the NFL this year right now.
Not yet, but man, he's playing well.
He's playing terrific.
And I'm sure you can see it on TV too, but especially from the press box when you have kind of the overhead angle, it was amazing how often Cook touched the ball against the Giants, and 2 defenders would be closing in on him, and he would just go zip.
Yes.
I mean, he has that ability. He's not just fast. Pure speed doesn't always play well in the NFL. He's got acceleration, and he can accelerate into and out of cuts. And he made some people look silly last Sunday.
Yeah, he does. He's really off to a great start this year. And I think the key there is manage his carries and make sure that you keep him healthy because they need him. And Alexander Madison is a very good number 2 back. I think he's a better player than Latavius Murray last year.
He's better than I thought he was.
Yeah, and a good rookie. But Dalvin Cook is the guy who really is important for this offense because he balances everything. And that's going to be the interesting thing going forward, I think, with this team. Can they keep that balance? I think we saw last week really ideally how they would like to play in almost 500 yards of offense. But again, against the Giants, we know that. And now it's going to get tougher. They're stepping up in class this week against Philadelphia, and Detroit has a pretty good defense too. And then down the road, they're going to face some tough teams, and they still have the Bears and the Packers at the end of the season. But a good sign last week to get things back on track here.
Absolutely. Let's do our picks. Thanks again to B-52 Burgers and Brew and White Bear Lake Superstore. Their websites are very self-explanatory. It's White Bear Lake WhiteBearLakeSuperstore.com and B52BurgersandBrew.com. That's B52 with the letter B and the numbers 52. B52 Burgers and Brew. So I realized the other day that I picked the Vikings to win every game this year. And, so I've missed 2, but the only one I feel bad about is the Chicago one. They just never play well in Chicago. So I shouldn't have picked them to win in Chicago. I thought would and should have won in Green Bay. So I only feel bad about one pick so far. This one, to me, is a true toss-up game. I always try to be somewhat decisive on these picks. I don't know who to pick, Jeff. Who are you picking?